you know? But, you know, you can get defects from the manufacturer. Guess what I opened this morning? I'm going to pass this around. Sherry, you want to take this? This is an example of a brand new bad lid. And I had never opened a bad lid before until this morning.
How funny is that?
Right? So I had my experience with finding a brand new bad lid. I also want to, while we're on the subject, and this is how your lids come. You get these little packs. They're usually a 12 count. You get them at Walmart. You can get them even in the grocery store. You've seen all the ball supplies inside of the store, right? And every jar comes with, I'm sure you know this too, comes with a lid and a ring. Okay, so you're going to have a million rings if you have a million jars. I'm not one of these ladies that has 1,500 quarts stored up. So, I mean, there are some ladies that like have these giant full pantries, and isn't that a dream to have? I would love that. But there are other covers that you can use. I use mason jars for a lot of stuff. I mean, you can do all kinds of things with mason jars. This is a little side thing, but like I make dressings and I use this guy. It's got that gasket in it, so it seals up. I love these things. You got that, and you got the plastic lids. They have a gasket as well. They're great to use. They have them in large and small. Okay, so we're gonna make mock jelly maybe. All right, so you got your, say we're gonna make blueberry, okay? You got your stock pot, a heavy bottom stock pot. So when you're making jams and jellies, they can burn easily because you got to bring these things to a rapid boil, a full boil. And a full boil is considered a full boil when you see it boiling and you stir it and it doesn't stop. If you have it starting to boil, you stir it and it calms down, that's not a rapid boil. So you got your rack, okay? I've heard of people using a towel to put on the bottom if you don't have a rack. It's not very even, but you can use a towel, you can use rings, something that will separate the jar from the heating element, because you have the chance of a jar breaking when it's directly against the heat. And like I said, I've heard of somebody having a problem with vacuum, which I haven't had that problem before. So the first thing I recommend is being organized. If you're not an organized person, try to get organized, because it gets chaotic when you're canning in the kitchen. It can get real messy when you're dealing with food. My recommendation is to prepare your food. Say you're doing your blueberries, mash your blueberries, get them ready. I measure out my lemon juice and I have it sitting there in the cup. I measure out my sugar, I have it sitting there. I have my pectin. Where is the pectin? Oh, right here. Okay, and I know some people maybe use Pomona's pectin. You have to add calcium water to that. I have not yet used Pomona's. I've just used Sure Gel. There's liquid pectin and there's powdered pectin. There's one that is a low or no sugar recipe. You use with one of them and then you use sugar with the other. And this jam that I just made was fantastic. And there was actually more fruit in it than there was sugar, which is a lot of recipes you'll see more sugar than you will fruit. So let's use one. Let's use a pretty jar. So you got all your ingredients out. You're ready. You set aside a little saucepan, and you know what? Ball is saying you don't have to do this now. I know when I learned, I was told that I needed to sterilize my jars, right? I needed to sterilize my rings. I needed to sterilize my lids. They're not saying that anymore. You wash your jars clean, They're saying to wash your lids, but I see some demonstrations that people aren't washing their lids. But what I do, and I've even seen them not do this, is, and this is ball, is you put water aside. You don't want it to boil necessarily, you just want it to get hot. And what it does is it softens the rubber on the ring. That's the idea of that, okay? You put those in. You have your, and you can use a stock pot to can in. You don't need a specific water bath canner. You can use just a big stock pot, and that's just what this is. I have a water bath canner. I couldn't find it because I used this year so far. I imagine I'll find the other one at some point. It's somewhere. I don't know how, my house is small. But so you're filling up your canner, and what you're doing is you're taking your clean jars that have been inspected. You want to make sure you don't have any defects, and actually I did find a defect on a brand new jar too lately. There was a lump right here, which would definitely affect the seal, you know? So what you're doing is you're taking your clean jars, your hands are clean, you're filling it up with water so that these are submerged, okay? And you're just gonna make it so that these are at a simmer or just below a simmer. You wanna heat up your jars, because what you don't wanna do is put cold content or hot content. You don't want to mix those two things, because that's when you have the opportunity to have cracking in your jars. Okay, so what you're doing is you're putting your jars in here, you're warming them up, they're clean, and now you got everything going. You got your lids in your pan over here, you got your warm jars, you got your food all prepared, everything's measured out, and you're ready to go. So I don't have much room on here. Excuse me while okay. Can you guys see this? Right? You see this? Okay, and this is a tool that they didn't list. This lifts your jar lids so you don't have to touch them, okay? Isn't that cute? I like that one too. And my stainless steel ladle. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your boiled blueberries. If you're making a jam, you're mashing it. My husband and I don't really like big lumps of fruit in our stuff, so I just stick mine in the Vitamix and blended it up. Apparently they call that a fruit butter. I feel fancy. Okay, so what you're gonna do is take your funnel. I was about to make a mess. Your clean jar, and it's also recommended to do one jar at a time. Here's where I have a bad habit of putting all my heated jars out and filling them all at once. But see, can you imagine now that that's right? I put the food coloring in it. And in this case, a jelly is about 1/4 inch headspace. And you put headspace in there because you can, if you have too little or too much, it's not going to create that vacuum. You need a little bit of air inside of the jar for it to create the vacuum in the end. Also, if it has too little, these are things that can happen. This isn't necessarily what's going to happen. Okay, so you've also put your pectin in, you've put your sugar in, everything's boiled, it's boiled to the right, you're following your recipe.
Do you prefer a wooden spoon?
I don't really like wood because I feel like it can...
But this is really nice to use.
You like it?
Yeah, and I watch my mother can so much that she often uses not a straight sided cookie sheet, but the kind that has edges. You lay the towel in the cookie sheet.
Yeah. So that you can...
Your jars ready, and they usually come out of a dishwasher, so they're hot.
Right,
ready.
right.
And that way, if you want to relocate it in your kitchen on the cookie sheet, it's easier. And it's also really nice if you either have someone helping you, family or friend, you help each other. And it makes a big, big difference.
Yeah, I could see, actually.
You do batches that way by moving them.
Right. And that would be convenient to be able to move everything at once, because I can't tell you.
Not only that, if you're putting a hot liquid in your counter, can react to that hot topic.
And that was something else I was gonna bring up. Yeah, you need that's the other thing, you need a towel to lay down. So you don't wanna take, that was one of my next things. You don't wanna take a hot jar with hot content, and I should have put it under here, is you want to have a towel underneath, because you don't want a hot product to go onto the cold, because you can have cracking there as well. So we can pour a little bit more in here. Go about here. And on here, the headspace tool, this is the little stairs I was talking about. You got a 1/4 inch, you got a 1/2 inch, you got 3/4 of an inch, and you got an inch, okay? This happens to be 1/4 inch headspace. And what you're gonna do is go around, and I can add more to that. Now I added too much. So now you know I'm not very good at pouring this now. So what you do is, that's the clearance that you want to have for the 1/4 inch headspace. You just go around and make sure, if you have something like, whatever, carrots or something, you might have some things sticking up above the top. Ideally, they want to be down. It's not going to be a terrible thing if you got some stuff sticking up above the top when you're pressure canning. So you want to make sure you have the headspace. Now you got your warmed jar lid and your ring, okay? When you put the ring on, you want to do it finger tight. You don't want to wrench these things down. You just want to do it till it stops, and then a little bit more. Okay, remember, this is hot. I shouldn't be touching it. Just saying. So now you have your water that is hot, but it's not at a boil. You're gonna set these in here. You wanna keep them, so there's a little bit of a space between each jar. You can also do double layering. You can get another rack and set it on top, as long as your canner can handle that. As long as you have 1 to 2 inches above your jars, your bottom jars, then you're all set, okay? Put the lid on. You don't really need a lid, but you'll see when you get to the rolling boil, you're gonna have water popping out all over the place. So you process it for, in this case, it would be about 10 minutes. And you wanna start timing it when it's at that rolling boil. You don't want to start ahead of that time, because it's not the full 10 minutes processing. So you process for 10 minutes, and this is the exciting part. You take your jars out, you have your cookie sheet now, forever, I'll do it.
If you get one crack or break or leak.
Yeah, then you got it contained too. It's really a good idea. So you got your hot jar, and you're bringing it over to your towel, and you're setting it down. You want to keep it upright. You're going to see that there's water on the top. You don't have to tip your thing to get it off. This is so hot that it just dries. You know, and another thing is too, sometimes if you have hard water, you're going to see that there's a hard water stain on the top of this. You can just stick a couple of tablespoons of vinegar, white vinegar inside of it, and I forgot that step too. You want to clean your jar. I should have said that. You want to clean the top of your jar to make sure there's no food on top of it. Like I just made this jelly, and it gels pretty well. A lot of people will use white vinegar because it's a better cleaner. You can use hot water and just take your rag and dip it in what you're going to use and clean that surface before you put the lid on, okay? Because if you have anything on top of this surface, you can also have a poor seal, and maybe a seal will fail later. You don't want that. So you set it here on your counter, and pretty soon the sound of music. You're gonna hear pop, these little pings going off, and it's like, yes, you know you have a successful seal. And this is where you want to avoid messing with your jars. Just leave them. Set them, they say 12 to 24 hours. You know, my jam, once I heard it ping and it cooled down to the point where I could touch it, I was moving it, you know. But in general, to be safer, just leave your jars, let them cool. If you are using a cookie sheet, you can move them to another room if you're doing batches of stuff. But it's that simple. Water bath canning is so easy. It's where I believe maybe everybody should get their feet wet if you haven't yet. And now moving on to pressure canning. Pressure canning, you're doing the same things to set the jars up. Same exact things. The only thing about pressure canning is, you've heard the horror stories, right? That it's a bomb, it's gonna blow up, you get scared. I'm gonna be honest with you, I bought my pressure canner and it sat in my kitchen in a box for 4 years because I was petrified to use it. I had all this produce and I was afraid. I was afraid to use it. And I'm gonna show you my pressure canner and you're gonna be like, you're afraid of that thing blowing up? The thing is pressure canners now are so well made and have so many they have safety features on them enough that you don't have to worry. You think this is gonna blow up?
Yeah.
No! I mean, I suppose it could if you did really stupid things. But this is an All-American. The one that we're giving away, the Presto, is the one you see a lot of people have. And a lot of people get these too, usually real serious canners do. I went all in, you know? I just went all in. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna get the best of the best. So what people say, the best of the best. These are anywhere from like $300, $400 all the way up to $1,500, okay? This is about a mid-size. And the thing about pressure canning is, and you know, people get afraid of it, it's really nothing to be afraid of. You only have to know a few things. This is where your altitude comes in. Know your altitude. Refer to your recipe again. Refer to your recipe. It'll tell you the correct processing time. And the only thing you have to do with a pressure canner is make sure this is a vent pipe. Make sure it's clear. Inspect the fact that you can hold it up and I can see you guys through this hole. If not, you take something metal and you clear this hole out, okay? That's something that you want to do. If you have a Presto, and this is another reason why I got an All-American, because there's no seal to replace. But what I do have to do with this one, and take a little bit of vegetable oil on my finger and run it around the edge, because it's a metal on metal seal, okay? The other thing you want to do is get your gauge calibrated every so often. I believe they recommend once a year. I have never gotten this calibrated actually, but it works. It works fine. I'll say that it works fine. There is this guy right here, which is, this is why, and I don't take this out much, but this is why canners are a little bit more safe, pressure canners. You see this little plastic thing or this rubber thing? And you can replace these every so often. They have them, you can just buy them and replace them every so often. But if they start to get dry or cracked, or you start to see, you should see, it's okay to see a little bit of leakage out of these. In fact, the first time I used this, I was like, oh no, it's failing. You know, I was freaking out about everything. But there was really no reason to. You can see a little bit of seepage out of these, but it doesn't mean that it's failing. So again, you have to have a rack in here. But the other difference between a pressure canner and water bath is you only have to fill a pressure canner 2 to 3 inches with water. Put your rack in. Again, you can double stack these two. The steam will take care of the processing. And for this guy, where's my arrow? There's an arrow here. There's an arrow and an indent. And you got these guys right here. Holding on. My edge is sealed. And I take the wing nuts opposite each other and I finger tight these guys. I do the same all the way around, okay? Another thing you want to make sure of is this is even all the way around. You don't want your lid on crooked, okay? So I have all my seals on. I've done all the same things. I got warm jars, warm product, unless you're cold packing. That's another thing. You can cold pack or raw pack. And you put in cold product or raw product inside of warm water and you just bring the temperature up more gradually, okay? So you're gonna get your recipe, your altitude, and there's a weight that goes with this. a pressure regulation weight, which I had. It's a round weight. Hold on. Oh, shoot. Well, anyway, it's a round weight right here that sits on top of this. And what happens is when it gets to that certain amount of pressure, like mine's generally set at 10. You'll see a 10, a 5, and a 15. Mine's generally set at 10. When it starts to come up to pressure, before you put that on, you should get steam out of this steam pipe for 10 minutes solid. When you hear the steam coming out, you know it's time to put your weighted regulator on, and you let it sit for a while and you'll hear it jiggle. It just jiggles a little bit. It should jiggle between 1 and 4 times per minute to when you start, that's when you'll start your time, okay? And your gauge, say my recipe calls for 11 pounds. So I got my gauge, my weighted regulator at 10, and this guy comes up to 11. Say it starts to go over, don't panic. After a while, when you've done canning for a while, you'll just know that, hey, if I set my stove on 5, it's gonna stay around this pressure. So it's another thing. It's something to get used to. When you get used to your stove, when you get used to your canner, these things will be just second nature, easy. You process for the amount of time that your recipe says. With a pressure canner, you wait until you come all the way back down to 0 again. When your product is completely done, wait till you come back to 0. You do not take the cover off of a pressure canner, or try to pull off the weighted gauge before it's time, because if anybody's ever gotten burnt with steam, you know it's no joke, right? So wait until this is to 0 and wait about 5 minutes beyond that. When you take your cover off, you take it all off evenly again, you lift it away from you, because again, that steam's gonna be coming up in your face. Lift it away from you. Put it off to the side. You still have really hot jars here. You're just gonna do the same thing. You're gonna bring them and you're gonna put them off to the side on your towel. And it's as simple as that. There's nothing to be afraid of. I'd still recommend starting with higher acid foods in the water bath canner. It's a lot less scary, but you really don't have to be afraid of this. It's not rocket science. It's really not bad.
Have you ever canned in Instapot? Because it has a canning setting.
Not all of them do, actually. And that was another thing I was going to bring up. Pressure canner and a pressure cooker are 2 different things. This happens to be a combo. I can pressure cook and pressure can in here. But if your Instapot isn't made to pressure can, you should not pressure can inside of it, because you can't guarantee the stability of your product. All right. So again, you're doing things like potatoes and tomatoes and, all right, and you ask, well, how long does this canned food last? Well, the USDA will tell you 12 months is when it's its freshest, and they say you can use it up to 2 years. Okay. Now we're gonna put the USDA aside. This is an 8-year-old jar of tomatoes that I will still eat. And do you know, I actually drank, it was at least 20-year-old, but I think it may have even been 30-year-old grape juice. And it wasn't fermented. I actually drank that. Do I recommend it to anybody? No. But you know, I was with people that were much, much older than me that had years of canning experience, and it was his mom's grape juice. She was like in 98 years old, and he's like, do you want to try it? I'm like, no. But it was peer pressure from the 80-year-olds. I drank it, and it was perfectly fine. It was perfectly fine. So with that said, you use your own judgment. You have something, I've used all of this. This is my last jar from 2016 of tomatoes, and I will gladly eat that, no problem. 2023, 23, 23, there's 22s in here somewhere. I will use all of it. It's no problem. And how can you tell if you have a broken seal? It's pretty obvious. We had a few broken seals because we've moved some of the jars that we had from one house to another. They've been bumped around, they've been, you know, you can tell pretty much if you see anything suspect, if you see any little floaties inside, or it looks real cloudy, you can even see like physical mold inside of things, pretty nasty. And I've only had like 3 seals break, but I've treated these cans so bad that they should have broke. More of them should have broke, you know, but they didn't. They're real safe. You should be able to, a cooled jar, you should be able to easily lift it. It's recommended not to stack jars when you're storing them. And you can, but you're gonna have to put something over it, like something, a board or something. But even, I don't stack my jars. I just leave them on one level, and a lot of ladies will say the same thing. Leave them on one level, but you can stack them. I just wouldn't. And I also take the rings off because this can hide a broken seal.
Milk crates. Peggy stacks her with milk crates.
Yeah, that's great. Peggy's the one that taught me to can, actually. Peggy's the one that taught me to can. So we take the rings off as well because this can hide a false broken seal. You know, it can hold it on there enough that you won't see that it's, you know, and then you take it off and you find out that, you know, you have a compromised seal. So we take these off. You can leave them on if you want to, you know, your call. And that's pretty much it for canning. I'm just gonna leave it there. There's other things that we can go into, but I'm not going to. I'm starting to run long. I wanted to talk to you about drying. Okay, you can also freeze your things. You know, you blanch them. You put your peas. I just did peas from the garden because I just didn't have time to can them. And I had too many of them and I was tired of shelling them. So I just decided I was gonna freeze them. And one of the things that we're giving away that makes freezing easier, and Peggy gave me this, and I think I have it up there already, don't I? I have it up there already. I'm sorry. Here, she gave me this. This is a game changer. I can't wait to use one of these. It looks stupid and simple, but when you're the one filling the bags and you're by yourself, I hate getting the stuff on the seal, you know? So when you're freezing, blanch your stuff, 1 to 2 minutes. Take it out, shake off the water. If you have a big enough freezer, which I do not, take a cookie sheet, lay your things out, get as much water off them as you can, freeze them in a single layer. They're frozen. You can stick them inside of the bag and they won't stick together. I didn't do that. I didn't have a freezer. I stuck my wet peas in there and I got a block of peas, and that's fine. They're gonna heat up the same way. You know, I got a block of peas, it's not so bad. But these things, this is great. We're gonna give a couple of these away, okay? In fact, why don't we do that now? Let's just give these away. And I use this just for the sample. You have an unopened thing of bags and these.
All right, so give those away next.
Yeah, we'll give these away. We got 2 of these. I didn't plan on talking about freezing right away, but go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
If you could use the bag, seal it, and then lay them flat, then the freezer is.
You can do that too. Yeah, you can definitely do that.
Labeling the bags before you fill them.
Yeah, definitely, because how many times have you stuck something in the freezer and you can't identify it? Even maybe a week or 2 after, in my case. I'm like, what is this? You can, unless you're really fast. I've erased it a few times, but no, it's not very successful that way. Isn't that pretty?
All right, yeah,
Pretty cool. So you want to keep, did you give them both away?
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing I want to say about the canned things. Your enemy is light, your enemy is heat, your enemy is moisture. Where else are we? And you want to keep these things away from light. I've had things that were stored in the light and it changes the color. It kind of oxidizes the food and it's not as attractive. It loses its flavor a little bit more, you know. So you really want to keep things in a cool, dark place. A basement is great for that. If you got cabinets, that's what me and Chris happen to have, basements. Let me see. I just want to make sure I covered everything. And I did. Okay, so now we come to drying. And I'm going to kind of whiz through this because I know I'm keeping you folks a while. I love drying stuff. This is an Excalibur. It's one of the top of the line dryers. It has Keflex sheets that you can make like fruit roll-ups on. You just puree fruit, literally pour it on, about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch thick. It has a setting for fruit leather, they call it. You lay this on top of the rack, slide it in for the allotted amount of time. You come back some hours later. This sits on my center island all the time. Okay, we dry herbs. I got parsley here. I'm going to demonstrate something that's really cool too. I love drying stuff. And then you got this. I've made countless kale chips, and you can see they actually look stained even though they're clean. It's a little bit of a pain to clean, but it's not bad if you keep, you know, neatness. You can use parchment paper. You don't have to have these Keflex things. With the one we're giving away, silicone sheets, they're really nice, okay? So literally, drying is a breeze. You get that? To you. That's what I wanted, thank you. So, and it actually saves space in storage. You got all these wet cans, they take up a lot more space, and I say this because, okay, I'm gonna give you an example. I just did these blueberries this week. These blueberries were the size of a quarter. They're Patriot blueberries. They get huge, okay? I had one of these racks and a half. Shoulder to shoulder, cut in half blueberries. This is what I got. Okay, this is what happens is the food shrinks to a point where it shrinks to nothing and you're almost like, what, that's all I got? But I mean, this stuff rehydrates. I'm not gonna put this in a soup, but you know, these are tomatoes. I did these in 2022. They're just as fresh as they were when I put them in. They have more nutritional value than something that you'd wet can. Not as much as when you'd eat fresh, it does decline, you know, but these taste like candy. That's the other thing. It concentrates the salts and the sugars. That's something you have to keep in mind. If you're a diabetic and you're having, you must know that dried fruit is concentrated, essentially, right? And dried fruit and vegetables takes out about 90% of the moisture. You're left with about 10%. So you have to be mindful. You really should take the air out of these jars, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate for you. I got this coolest contraption, and somebody in the audience is gonna have this too. I love this thing. And wait, I'm gonna show you what